Yeah, so we have, yeah, if you look at the, you know, yeah, if you look at the, what is showing on your screen here, you begin to see that, these are important concepts in biology. Now, earlier yesterday, we looked at from A to C, which are over 100 of them. So I want to start from D this morning. Now, if you look at D simply means deamination. Now, we said that deamination is a process in the liver that changes amino acids into urea and carbohydrates. Now, when we're talking about carbohydrates, we're talking about sugars which are stored as glycogen. Remember that these excess sugars are usually stored in the body as what? As glycogen. So the process in the liver that changes amino acids into urea and carbohydrates, that particular process is what? Deamination. So whenever you hear about deamination, understand that deamination is the process that actually happens in the liver of an organism. Now, what usually happens is that, amino acids are usually converted to urea and then carbohydrate. Now, the next one, which is 117, the next one here is deciduous teeth. Are we together now? Now, when we're talking about deciduous teeth, now deciduous teeth are actually, milky teeth. When we get there, we'll look at it. Now, we have deficiency disease. Whenever you hear about deficiency in biology, what are we focused on? We said that is a disease that results from a shortage of a mineral or vitamin in a diet. How do that? So let's say when we have maybe a mineral deficiency or a vitamin deficiency. So it's actually a disease that results from the shortage of a particular important nutrient in the body of an organism. Now we have denaturation. We're talking about denaturation. Now denaturation is the alteration of the structure of protein molecules. Are we together now? So when you hear about denaturation, what we are focused on is, alteration of the structure of protein molecules. Now, at your level, before let me just go a bit higher. We have different structures of protein. We have primary structure, we have secondary structure, we have tertiary structure, and then we have quaternary structure. Say, for instance, you bring your egg. How would you know? Now, when you get your egg and then you want to try as much as possible to say, okay, let me, parboil this egg so that you can eat it. Now, when you start boiling egg, you begin to see that those eggs you're boiling, what happens is that you are changing the shape of that normal egg to a particular solid concept. So the ability whereby you change this particular egg from your fresh egg to a boiled egg, the process is called what? Denaturation. So denaturation is more like alteration of the structure of protein. Now, when we are done with that, we look at dental formula. If you are just joining, these are concepts of biology. Important concept you need to know about biology. I prepared this, it took time. So try as much as possible to take your book. Take your book and be writing these concepts down so that at the end of the day, you can make sense out of them. When you see them in your exam, you'll not be discouraged. Are we together now? Good. So we look at denaturation. So that denaturation is the alteration of protein molecule. We've talked about that. And then we'll move on to dental formula. When we're talking about dental formula, we're saying that is a way, of representing the members and types of teeth in the jaws of mammals. Now, the ways of arranging the dentals, good. So, ways of arranging the dentals, are we together now? Now, within the jaw types around the teeth is called what? It's called dental formula. Now, every organisms have their own dental formula. We have dental formula for mammals like your rats or rabbits. We have that of human and all. Now, if we come to dentine, which is another concept. Now, in another dental, we say that dentine is a bone-like material beneath the enamel of a tooth. Now, when we're talking about enamel is more like, the strongest form of a tooth structure. Is the hardest part of a tooth. And then we'll move on to DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Is the hereditary material of the what? Of the chromosome. If you've been following my class here, you understand that, whenever I'm talking about DNA, I say that DNA simply means what? Deoxyribonucleic acids. So DNA is a hereditary material in the body of a living organism. So in this scenario now, we're saying that DNA, which is a deoxyribonucleic acid, is the hereditary material of the what? Of the chromosome. Now move on to dermis, D-E-R-M-I-S. Now dermis, there are layers of skin beneath the epidermis that contain blood vessels and nerves. They contain what? Blood vessels and nerves. That's dermis. They are beneath the epidermis. So that means epidermis is above them and then dermis is what? Below. All these are located in your what? In the layers of your what? In the layers of your skin. Now we have detritus. We are done with dermis. Now we have detritus. Now when we're talking about detritus, they are fine particles of organic materials. So when we are talking about fine particles of organic materials, they are called what? Detritus. And then we have diabetes. Now, diabetes is a condition caused by the failure of the pancreatic islets to produce insulin. So when insulin is not produced, by this pancreatic gland, we begin to see that excess sugar will be introduced into the blood. Not excess sugar in the body, but excess sugar in the what? In the blood. Are we together now? So diabetes is that condition that arises when the pancreatic gland fails to produce what? Insulin. The question now is, what is the function of insulin? Now we're saying that insulin is a hormone that tries as much as possible to regulate, blood sugar content. So when there is no hormone that regulates this blood sugar content, you begin to see that sugars will just flow in straight into the what? Into the blood. That's diabetes. We've done that. Now move to diaphragm. When we're talking about diaphragm, we say that diaphragm is a particle of muscle and what? And tendon separating the thorax and abdomen in what? In a mammal. That particle of muscle and tendon are separating the what? The thorax and abdomen in a mammal is called what? It's called diaphragm. Now, I move on to what I call diastema. Now, diastema is actually a space between front teeth and cheek teeth in some herbivores. The question now is, what are herbivores? I've always said that when we're talking about herbivores are organisms that try as much as possible to feed on plants. We call them what? Herbivores. So the space between the front teeth and the cheek teeth in some herbivores like your goats, where food can be stored, is called what? A diastema. It is called what? A diastema. Okay, let's continue though. Now we'll come here again. Look at diastole. Now under diastole, we say that diastole generally is the stage in the heartbeat of a vertebrate when the ventricle is relaxed and receiving blood. I've explained what we mean by ventricles. If you join my video in the morning, I explain ventricles and auricles. Now we also have dicotyledon. In dicotyledon, we say that it's a flowering plant whose seeds have two embryonic leaves. Are we there now? Is a flowering plant whose seed have two what? Embryonic leaves. That's dicotyledons. Now move on to what we call differentiation. When we're talking about differentiation in this scenario, we're saying that differentiation is a process, right? Now by which cells become specialized for different function. When we're talking about specialized, we are saying that cells become more useful to perform a specific or other functions. Are we together now? And then you move on to diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. I've said it countless times. When we're talking about molecules, we're not talking about just liquid. We're talking about gas. Are we there now? So in diffusion, we're not just talking about, a liquid substance. We're talking about gas. That's why we say molecules. From higher to what? From higher to lower. And then we have digestion. In digestion, we're saying it's the process of breaking down complex, food particles into simpler food particles. That's the simple definition of what? Of digestion. And then if you move to the hybrid cross, now a cross between individuals differing in two inheritable discontinuous traits. I've explained the hybrid cross here, and I told you that in the hybrid, the ratio of the hybrid phenotypic ratio is 9:3:3:1. That's the ratio of what? Of a dihybrid cross. Now we have diploid, a cell having full set of paired chromosome, which is what? Diploid is equal to 2n. Now move on to disinfectant, a solution which kills what? Which kills microbes. If you are just joining the video, you can like the video and then drop a comment if you have any question. I will go through them at some point and then I will explain. Are we together now? And if you don't understand any particular concept of what I'm explaining here, try as much as possible to ask your question. You can let me know. Are we together now? You can ask your question here by typing and then I'll see how I can answer. Now we've done diploid. Let's move to disinfectant. Now a disinfectant is a solution which kills what? Microbes. What are microbes? Microbes are what? Disease-causing microorganisms. That's microbes. Microbes are what? Disease causing what? Microorganisms. There are microorganisms that causes your gonorrhea. There are microorganisms that try as much as possible to cause some infection in the body. Are we together now? So those microorganisms that causes those infections are called what? Microbes. Are we together now? So when a particular solution that I use to kill microbes, they are called what? Disinfectant. If you remember the examples of disinfectant, you begin to see that some of the examples. We have Dettol, you have Izal. Are we there now? So those are some of the examples of what? Of disinfectant. Okay, we move on. Division of labor, different cells in the body performing different, functions. Are we there now? Like, when we're talking about your, let's take for instance your cellular organelles, and then we have what we call mitochondria. This is mitochondria. And then mitochondria is more like powerhouse of a cell. Mitochondria performs a separate function from nucleus. Nucleus perform a separate function from ribosomes. So these are different, cell organelles that has different function. That's what I mean by what? Division of labor. We're saying that different cells in the body of an organism, individuals, or insects are specialized for a what? A specific function. You understand? Now, we have dominant, one pair of contrasted genes that shows or express itself even in the presence of an alternative form. When we're talking about dominant characters are usually represented with what? Capital letter. That means they are dominant. If I have capital A, small a, capital A is dominant. Why small a is what? Is recessive. If I have capital B, small b, capital B is dominant. Why small b is what? Is recessive. It's dominant because this B can express itself either in this heterozygous condition or in what? Homozygous condition. But this small b can only express itself in a homozygous what? Condition. Homozygous are same character. Heterozygous different, capital and small. Homozygous, capital, small, small. They are all homozygous. So those capital letters that are present are called what? Are called dominant characters. Now we have dorsal. When you're talking about dorsal, those are our back or upper side of the body. That's the meaning of dorsal. Now we move on to Down syndrome. When we're talking about Down syndrome, a Down syndrome is a disorder in which the cells of the human contain one extra chromosome. Are we together now? Now, instead of an individual, remember, let's take for instance, we have, an individual having 46 chromosomes. And then we say that instead of this individual having 46, they're having what? One extra chromosome, which is what? 47. That particular disorder is called what? Down syndrome. Instead of an individual to have maybe XY chromosome, they're having XXY chromosome or XYY chromosome. Those are what? Those are disorders. So we move on to drug. We said that a drug is a substance that changes the way the body works. Meanwhile, drug is different from medicine. Biology students understand that drug is entirely different from what? Medicine. When we're talking about drugs, drug can actually try as much as possible to produce, a positive effect or a negative effect. At the end of the day, it also changes the way the body works, just as my definition here states it. But I want you to understand that medicine can also be classified as drug. Because when you take a medicine is under drug. But in this scenario now, the difference between medicine is that medicine only produce a positive change, but drug can either produce a positive, which is medicine, or negative effect. So we move on to ductus arteriosus. It's the duct that connects the pulmonary artery to the aorta in the fetal circulation. What is fetal? Fetal is more like baby in the womb. Are we together now? The organism that is still in the womb, especially in a pregnant woman. So the duct that connects the pulmonary artery to the aorta in the fetal circulation is called what? The ductus arteriosus. Now we have duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. That's duodenum for you. I will move on to number E, letters under E. We have what we call ear ossicles. These are three small bones in the middle of the ear that transmit sound from the eardrum to the oval window. That transmits sound from the eardrum to the what? Oval window. And then we'll move on to echolocation, a process of locating objects by detecting sound waves that have been produced by the animal and reflected from the object. So just by using an object to dictate a sound that has been produced, we want to say, okay, this particular place, there was a noise produced, so we can use this particular object, to locate where that sound is coming from and which organism produced that sound. So that phenomenon is called what? Echolocation. And meanwhile, in ecology, generally, we are talking about study of natural environment, study of organisms in their natural what? In their natural environment. That is what? Ecology. Is an important topic. It's in this ecology now that you begin to look at, factors affecting ecology. There are different factors affecting ecology. And then you begin to look at the biotic and the what? Abiotic factors. Are we together? Okay. We also have edaphic factors. Okay, let's look at ecosystem first. Under ecosystem is a space containing a group of interactive organisms. That's what we call ecosystem, a space containing a group of what? Interactive organisms. And we also have edaphic factors. When you hear about edaphic factors in biology, what are we saying? Edaphic factors, are those determined by the nature of the soil in which an organism lives. Just like when we say biotic factors are living factors, abiotic, non-living. Now, edaphic factors are factors, that are constituted as a result of the soil the organism lives in. We have effector, an organ which produces a response to stimulus. That's called what? An effector. Are we together now? Now we move on to efferent neurons. Now when we're talking about efferent neurons, I want you to understand that efferent neurons, they are nerve carrying impulse away from the central nervous system. Central nervous system is CNS. Are we together now? So those nerves that carry information, impulses away from the CNS is called what? Efferent neurons. Egestion. What does egestion mean? Egestion is the process of removing feces from the anus. So the process whereby you go to your, WC and then you dump your whatever there. Are we together now? Now the process of removing those particular feces, via your anus is called what? Egestion, not ingestion. Egestion, removal. We have elimination. It's the removal of waste material from the body. Egestion is only focused on, removing feces from through the anus. Elimination, we're talking about the removal of waste products from the body, or waste materials. Are we there now? There are a lot of waste materials in your body. Are we there now? We have urea. Urea is a waste product. Are we there now? We have sweat. Sweat is a waste product. Are we together now? So the removal of those waste products is called elimination. We have embryo. Now, when we're talking about embryo is the developmental stage of an organism formed by cell division of the fertilized egg or zygote. So that means when we're talking about an embryo being formed, remember, first of all, there must be a fertilization before we have an embryo that is formed. Please, if you are following me, you can drop an emoji in the chat. Let me know that some persons are following. Now, generally, when we're talking about embryo, I say that it's a developmental stage after fertilization. Already after fertilization, the first result is zygote to be formed. So as that zygote continue to advance, what is the next thing that will form? Embryo. And then we also have embryonic sac or embryo sac. It's a sac, inside the ovule of a flowering plant containing the female gamete. That small sac inside the ovule of a flowering plant containing the female gamete is called what? Embryo sac. If you are following, please drop an emoji. If you have questions, please ask. It's an interactive session so that we know that you're following. Now move on to emulsification. I've told my students countless times that when we're talking about emulsification is the same thing as what? Breakdown. If I say emulsification of fat, I'm saying breakdown of fat. So in this scenario now, is the physical breakdown of fat into droplets. Are we together now? So emulsification is the physical breakdown of fat into what? Into droplets. Now we have enamel. I've told you already that enamel is more like the hard layer of an individual's tooth. And those strong layers of your tooth nature are called what? Enamel. And then we have what we call endocrine gland, which is the next. Endocrine. I've explained enamel. Endocrine gland. Now under endocrine gland are also called ductless gland. If you don't call them endocrine, you call them what? Ductless gland. That passes its secretion directly into the bloodstream. So the secretion of this particular endocrine gland enters directly into the what? Into the bloodstream. Its secretion and hormones, because it's ductless gland that produces hormones. If there is no gland, then there will be no hormone. So it's from gland that then we have hormone. We also have endometrium. We're talking about endometrium. It's the interstitial inner layer of the wall of the uterus of a mama. Now the inner layer of the walls of uterus. Another name for uterus is what? Is womb. Of a mama. Like when we're talking about mama, we're talking about, let's take for instance, man, a woman. Now the nutritional inner layer of the wall of your uterus is called what? Endometrium. We move on to endoplasmic reticulum. It's a system of double membrane inside the cytoplasm of a cell. It's part of, cell organelles, important cell organelles. Endoskeleton, we have three types of skeleton: endo, exo, and hydrostatic. So endoskeleton is the internal skeleton of bone or cartilage. It's typically found in vertebrates, right? Typically found in what? Invertebrates. Now, we have endosperm. It's the nourishing tissue found in the seeds of certain plants. In every plant, we have what we call, endosperm. And under this endosperm, we're talking about, nourishing tissue that are found in the seed. When we're talking about seed is actually like when a particular plant have, grown to a point, you begin to see that there is a result that is formed as a result of that growth. That result is what we call what? The seed. Like when you grow a mango and then it stays for long, you say, we will see mango fruit. That is the seed. Are we together now? Good. So we're saying that the nutritional tissue found in the seed of a certain plant are called what? Endosperm. Now, energy, the capacity to do work, we've said it can less time. If you don't say capacity, you say ability. Are we there now? Now move on to enzymes. They are protein produced by living cells that act as catalysts. Or you can say that enzymes are biological catalysts that speeds up the rate of what? Chemical reaction. We have epicotyle. Epicotyle is a part of the stem above the attachment of the seed leaves. The part of the stem above the attachment of the what? Of the seed leaves. When we're talking about germination, I mentioned, the types of germination: hypogea and what? Apogea. Hypogea and what? And apogea. Okay. Now, we try as much as possible to, also look at, what we mean by epidermis. Now, in epidermis is the outer layer of a leaf or stem. Are we together now? Or you can say, now in this epidermis has two definitions. We have epidermis in that of plants and epidermis in that of what? In that of animal. At the end of the day, what I want you to understand is that both of them are outer layers. Now, if it was in plants, we're talking about outer layers of cells of leaves of stem. If it was an animal, we're talking about outer layers of the what? Of the skin of a mammal. So that your outer layer is called what? Epidermis. But if you are looking at leaves, we're looking at the outer layer is also called what? Epidermis. I don't know if you are following. I want you to ask me a question. Ask me a question. You have the time. Give me your question. I want to answer your question. So ask your question. Don't be afraid. Are we there now? I'm ready to answer. Look at the concept that you don't understand. Look at the specific concepts that you're finding difficult to understand. You ask your question. We are all here to learn. Okay, since no question yet, I will continue then. Now, we have epididymis. Epididymis is a coiled tube that stores sperm formed in the testes. So, for every young man here, we begin to see that when we talk about epididymis, this is MI. There was a mistake here in the typing. It should be epididymis, not epididymus. Epididymis. Now, when we're talking about epididymis, we say it's a coiled tube that stores sperm. Formed in the testes. Already you know that sperm are actually produced, within the testis region. So when we're talking about, storage of sperm, what stores sperm is what? This particular stuff here called what? Epididymis. Are we together now? Now we have what we call epigee germination. It's a seed germination in which the cotyledons come above the soil level. That's epigee. When the cotyledons, another name for cotyledons are seeds. When the seed grows above the soil level, that's epigee. The opposite of this epigee is what? Hypogea. Hypogea. Are we there now? Good. So we have epiglottis. It's a flap of tissue that prevents swallowed food entering the trachea. Are we there now? Without this particular epiglottis, is when immediately you swallow your food, all of them will pour inside your trachea, and your body will tell you. Are we there now? So this particular organelle or this particular body part or tissue, try as much as possible to prevent those swallowed food from entering the trachea. We have epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants that lives on the surface of another or non-living object. Are we there now? Like we have plants that live on trees. Those plants that live on trees are called epiphytic plants. We also have plants that live on walls, like some algae. Are we there now? They are called epiphytic plants. Are we together now? Now we also have a concept called era, a major division of geological time. Then, like when we say during the eras of this person, is we're talking about geological time. And then we have erosion, the removal of topsoil by the action of wind or rain. Now, when we say we have a serious erosion around this particular state, what we are focused on is that we're saying that it is more like a removal of topsoil by the action of what? Of wind or rain. We have erythrocyte. Another name for erythrocyte is what? Red blood cell. Then we have eukaryote. A eukaryote is a cell or organism whose cells contain a nucleus surrounded by a membrane. So, or you can also say that eukaryotes are organelles, or eukaryotes are organisms that possess true membrane-bound nucleus. If you don't want to say eukaryotes are cell or organism whose cells contain nucleus surrounded by a membrane, you can say that eukaryotes are organisms that possess true membrane-bound nucleus. True membrane-bound nucleus. Now we have eustachian tube. Eustachian tube is a tube connecting the middle ear to the throat. The tube connecting the middle ear to the throat is called what? The eustachian tube. All right. We'll move on. Moving on. We have evolution, a progressive change, a process by which new species are formed from existing types. According to the father of evolution, Charles Darwin, he said that an organism called man came because there has been an ape that existed several years ago. That means without the ape, man wouldn't have been formed. That is one of his theories of evolution. How man evolved from ape. So in a nutshell, when we're talking about evolution, we're just talking about how an organism evolved, how an organism came into play. Are we there now? Now, the progressive change that happened before a particular organism came into play. We have excretion. Excretion is the removal of waste products, the body's chemistry or metabolism. So if you don't say excretion, you say elimination. Both of them are saying the same thing. Now, we now have exocrine gland. We've explained endocrine. We say that endocrine, the gland release chemical substances which are called hormone into the blood immediately. Now in exocrine, we are saying that a gland which patches its secretion along a dot. The difference between endocrine and exocrine is that in endocrine, the secretions enters into the blood, but in exocrine, the secretion enters into the what? Into the duct. Are we together now? The secretion passes along the what? Along the duct. It doesn't enter into the blood as opposed to endocrine. We have exoskeleton is an external covering which protects and supports, protection. External covering which provides support and protection. That's exoskeleton. We have extensor, a muscle whose contraction strengthens a joint. Are we together now? So that is that. We'll enter F now. In this scenario, we say that we have from F, we have what we call F1 generation. And under F1 generation, we are saying that F1 generation offspring produced by the breeding of two individuals. Say for instance, if I have, how are F1 generation for? If you've not watched that my video on genetics, go and watch it. If I have, let's say capital T small t, then I have capital T small t. When they cross together, I'm going to have capital T small t, capital T small t. This first offspring that was formed because the first parent had an intercourse are called what? First filial generation. So if you don't call it F1 generation, you call it what? First filial generation. Offspring produced by the breeding of what? Two individuals. Now, F2 generation are offspring produced by the breeding members of the F1 generation. So that means these four offspring that I produce here, if let's say the first offspring and the last offspring decide to say, let's have intercourse, even though you're my sister. When they have intercourse, the next organism that we produce is called what? F2 gen. Are we then a second filial generation? I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying. Good. Now, move on to what is physis. A physis is an undigested waste material that passes out, of the anus. So if that particular material is digested, it wouldn't have go out as physis. But because it's undigested, they will pass out through the what? Through the physis. We have what we call fallout. It's a radioactive waste material by atomic what? Explosions. Fallopian tube, the tube leading from the ovary to the uterus where fertilization takes place. The tube that leads from the what? The ovary to the uterus. The tube that leads from the ovary to the uterus is called what? Fallopian tube. And this is the place where what? Where fertilization takes place. Because already, after the young man has introduced the spermatozoa into the body of a female, the sperm will swim until it finds the egg. And then immediately it penetrates the egg. Every other sperm that enters will die off. Are we there now? So, and then this particular, egg will try as much as possible to be fertilized. And we say that the fertilization try as much as possible to, be possible in the what? In the fallopian tube. Now we'll move on. We try as much as possible to say that under fatty acid, in fatty acid, what we are saying is that, fatty acids are, they are, if you've heard of lipids, you try as much as possible to see that fatty acids are complex forms, of lipids. Are we together now? Fatty acids are more like complex forms. Say, for instance, let me explain something. Lipid, there are 4 biomolecules in biochemistry. Let me draw your mind somewhere. There are 4 biomolecules in biochemistry. We have, carbohydrates, we have protein, we have nucleic acid, and then we have lipids. Now, each of these are biomolecules. We have what we call smaller molecules. Are we there now? Smaller molecules can be fatty acids that are combined together to form this giant molecule called lipid. Nucleic acid, nucleotides. Are we there now? Protein, amino acid, carbohydrates, monosaccharide. So when we're talking about fatty acid, we cannot form a lipid without the presence of what? Fatty acid. Are we there now? So fauna is a collective name for all animal life. All animal life that exists, are we there now, in this particular environment are called what? Fauna. Fauna. You getting what I'm saying? Now we'll move on. We say that we have what we call fermentation. Now fermentation is the partial breakdown of materials in the absence of oxygen. Are we there now? Now, during fermentation, ethanol and lactic acid may be what? May be produced. Now, fertilization, the fusion of male and female gamete to form a zygote. I've said it countless times. Filament is the stalk of a stamen. Are we there now? Filament is the stalk. Stalk is more like, more like an attachment end. Are we there now? That's stalk. More like an attachment end or attachment region. Good. Now we have what we call flaccid, a plant cell that is lacking in water, so the vacuole is not pushing out against the cell wall. So any particular plant cell that is lacking in water, preventing the vacuole from pushing out against the cell wall is called what? A flaccid. Now we also have a flagellum. Flagellum is usually used for movement, among protozoas. We have phloem cells, the excretory organs of flatworms. The excretory organs of flatworms are called what? Are called phloem cells, in case you see it in your exams. Phloem cells. Now we'll move on to flexor muscle, a muscle whose contraction bends a joint. That's flexor muscle. Flora, collective name for plant life. We have flora. We have flora, we have flora. Flora, the difference between small f and capital F is that if small is collective name of plant life, flora, capital F, is a book that explains plant behavior and plant life. Are we together now? Flora, capital F, L-O-R-A, is also the same spelling with this. It's just that this one is small letter, this one is capital F. Small letter is talking about collective name for plant life. Capital F is talking about a book that explains, this particular plant life. We have follicle. In follicle, we are saying that it's an oval sac inside the ovary of mama that contains an ovum. That contains what? An ovum. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is a female gonadotropin hormone secreted by the pituitary gland, which causes one or more ova to mature. How do you know? So FSH causes an ova. What is ova? Ova is egg. How do you know? That causes an ova to do what? To mature. Are we getting what I'm saying? Good. We have food chain, which is the next thing on the list here. We have food chain. Now, when we're talking about food chain, what are we looking at? In food chain is a way of showing how food passes from one organism to another. Say, for instance, you say from egg. Let's use this simple. Let's say from grass. Let's use grass to grasshopper. Are we there now? From grasshopper to bird. From bird to man. This is a food chain. Are we there now? trying as much as possible to explain how food passes from one organism to the other. As food is passing, the same thing, energy is also what? Passing. This is an example of a food chain. We have food web. The food web is the passage of food, from producer throughout all the various consumers in the ecosystem, made up of linked food chains. So that means when we have different food chains combined together, are we getting what I'm saying? We are going to form what? A food web. So that's why we call it what? Food web, because it's completely, housed up. It's huge. Different combination of what? Food chains. Now we have fungus. Fungus is singular. Plural is what? Fungi. A phylum of organisms that feed saprophytically or parasitically. They have cell walls of chitin. When we're talking about saprophytically it simply means that they feed on dead and decaying organic matters. When we're talking about parasitically, that means they depend on another organism without providing any advantage to that organism. That means they are leeching on what? That organism. Are we together now? Now move on to gallbladder. Now, number G, gallbladder. Now, the gallbladder is the sac in the liver which stores the bile. I explained bile earlier this morning. Are we together now? I explained bile earlier this morning. If you are following, please drop maybe a response in the comment so that I know that you people are not sleeping, that you are following. Please, I'll give you time. Okay, gallbladder. I've explained the gallbladder. I say garment is a reproductive cell, or you call it sex cell. That's garment. And then we'll move on to ganglion. When we're talking about ganglion, singular is what? Plural is ganglia, singular is ganglion. Is a group or cluster of what? Of nerve bodies. That's ganglion. Okay, you are following. Okay, that's amazing. All right. So we'll move on to gene. Now, in a gene, we're talking about is the length of DNA that controls a particular cell function and determines a particular feature of what? Of an individual. Right? Now, have you wondered why this particular individual is behaving strangely? Say this particular individual, every minute of the day they are talking. Why is this particular individual short? Why is this particular individual tall? That can be, as a result of their genes. Are we together now? So the way an organism behave, their genetic constitution, their genetic makeup can be as a result of what? Of their genes. Are you getting what we are talking about here? So now we move on to, genetics. In genetics is the study of heredity. I made a complete video explaining genetics. If you've not watched it, it's still in the live session. Go click on it and watch. Now, we have genotype. I said that is a genetic makeup of an individual. In genotype, we don't see an individual's genotype. It's only how it makes up. Are we there now? The results, that's what we see. And that result is called what? The phenotype. So the genetic makeup, what makes up that individual, is called genotype. And we don't see it with our what? Our eyes. Now we have what we call, geotropism. It's the growth of a plant or a part of a plant in response to what? Gravity. Are we there now? In response to gravity is called what? Geotropism. If we say we have positive geotropism is the growth of this particular plant towards, are we there now? Towards that particular gravity. If we say negative is away. Are you getting what we are talking about here? Good. So we have germination. It's the beginning of growth of a seed or spore. Are we there now? So how this particular seed starts growing, from Genesis, to Revelation, it is called what? Germination. We have a gestation period. Gestation period, what does it mean? Gestation period is actually the time for the fetus to develop in the mammalian uterus. How do you know? The time taken, after fertilization till point of delivery. How do you know? That particular time is called what? Gestation period. We have giantism, a condition caused by oversecretion of pituitary growth hormone during the time of skeletal growth. Why pituitary hormone is important, but when there is more like an excessive secretion of this pituitary hormone during the time of skeletal growth, helping that individual to be giant, we call that phenomenon what? Giantism. They say it's a disease condition. I'm not sure it's a disease condition. I think it will just be a condition on its own, not a disease condition. Because, giant is not a disease. In fact, it's a blessing. Now, move on to gill. The gill is a respiratory organ of some organisms, especially organisms in aquatic environment. Organisms in aquatic environment uses gills for what? For respiration. We have gizzard. A gizzard is a thick walled part of the alimentary canal of birds where food is what? Is grounded. We have glomerulus, a knot of capillaries associated with Bowman's capsule in the kidney, right? Glycogen, a long-chain carbohydrate used to store, used as a store in the liver of animals. When you continue to eat foods that are rich in carbohydrates excessively, your body will need it up to a point that your body can no longer need it. But because you keep on consuming that carbohydrate, your body will not throw it away. And what will happen is that your body will store that excess carbohydrate in form of glycogen in the liver muscle. Are we together? Now we have what we call goiter, an enlarged thyroid resulting from a shortage of iodine in the diet. Have you seen an individual's neck and then you're seeing something like protruding, shape coming out of that region? That is a disease condition called what? Goiter. It is because of lack of what? Iodine. Are we there now? We have gonad. Another name for gonad is called what? Sexual organ. So when you hear about gonadotropic hormone, we're talking about, sex hormones. Are we there now? So gonad is sex organ. So when I say gonadotropic hormone, I'm talking about what? Sex hormones. Now, gonorrhea is a sexually transmitted disease caused by what? Caused by bacteria. Just as I mentioned before, we call them microbes. We have gray matter, a part of the central nervous system composed of cell bodies of what? Of nerve cells. Are we together now? All right. Okay. Let's continue pressing. Now, under G, we have what we call guard cells. Now, guard cells are cells that can change their shape so as to open or close the stomata on the leaves. Now, we call them guard cells. They are more like security cells. They open and close the stomata pores of the leaves. We have gymnosperm. Gymnosperm are seed plants whose seeds are not enclosed in ovary. Now, this particular gymnosperm doesn't have flowers. Flowers are reproductive parts of a particular plant. So this gymnosperm does not have flowers. Are we together now? Okay. So we try as much as possible to move on to age. And under age, the first thing we are seeing here is what? Habitat. What then is habitat? It's a dwelling place of what? Of an organism. That's habitat for you, or where an organism lives. We move on to hemoglobin. It's the iron-containing pigment found in red blood cell, which forms a reversible association with what? Oxygen. So the iron-containing pigment found in the RBC, which is highly reactive with oxygen, is called what? Hemoglobin. Now move on to haploid. We've looked at diploid, and I told you that diploid is 2N. If diploid is 2N, that means haploid is what? Is just N. So instead of haploid is having one set of chromosomes. Now these particular chromosomes are not paired, so that's why we have what? N. But had it been diploid would have been what? 2N. Move on to hepatic portal vein. A hepatic portal vein is a large blood vessel carrying the products of digestion from the intestine to the liver. So that particular vein that carries the products of digestion from the intestine. Remember, in the intestine is where the whole digestive process happens. So carrying the whole product from the intestine to the liver, the particular vein is called what? The hepatic portal vein. We have herbivores. Herbivores are animals whose diets consist of only plant materials. We call them what? Herbivorous animals. Their diets only consist of what? Their diets only consist of plant material. They feed on plants. Examples of herbivores are your goats, your grass cutters. Are we together now? Now, your cattle. They are all what? They are all herbivores. Now, move on to heterotroph. A heterotroph is an organism that cannot make its own food, and as such, they depend on autotroph to survive. Example of heterotroph are what? Are herbivores. Herbivores are heterotrophs. Omnivores are heterotrophs. Carnivores are what? Are heterotrophs. Organism that depends on another organism to make the food that they will consume. It is called what? Those organisms are called heterotrophic organisms. Meanwhile, organisms that manufacture their own food themselves, like green plants, are called what? Autotrophic organism. Are you getting the gist now? So in this scenario, we're saying that, man is an example of what? Of a heterotrophic organism. Are we there now? Now, we move on to heterozygous. A heterozygous is an organism which possesses two different alleles at the same locus on each pair of chromosomes. I told you before that heterozygous can be something like this, capital letter B and small letter b. This is heterozygous. Homozygous is either capital letter B, or small b. They have the same capital letter, the same letter, capital here, small letter. But here, capital and small. So it is what? Heterozygous. Different pairs of alleles. We'll move on to heredity. We've talked about heredity, handling of characteristics from one generation to the next. Are we there now? And then we'll move on to helium, scar on a seed, where it was attached to the fruit. Histology, the study of biological tissues. Are we there now? If cytology, in cytology is the study of biological cells. If cytology is the study of cells, histology is the study of what? Biological tissues. Now move on to helophytic. It's a method of feeding in which the organism builds up or synthesizes its food from simple, inorganic materials. They are called what? Holophytic organism. Those organisms that undergo this particular holophytic method of feeding is called what? Holophytic organism. So they feed, there is a method of feeding in which organism build up or synthesize its fruit or its food from simple inorganic, not organic, inorganic materials. Are you getting what we are saying here? Now we have homeostasis. Homeostasis are, maintenance of steady states in body processes regardless of changes in the environment. Even if you are living in Medugri, so your ability of the body to maintain that steady environmental condition is called what? It's called homeostasis. Now we have what we call homeothermic. Homeothermic is having the body temperature that remains fairly constant or steady regardless of changes in the environment. Say when I move from Nigeria to maybe Russia, already the temperature has reduced. But when my body temperature still remains the same as it was in Nigeria that is very hot, you begin to see that that condition is called what? Homeothermic. Now we have homologous. When we're talking about homologous, we have what we call homologous chromosome. Okay, I'm glad you guys are following. Now, we have what we call homologous chromosome or homologous. Let's start from homologous. Body organs in different organisms that have a common pattern of construction. But if we move to homologous chromosome, it's a matching pair of chromosomes, each member arising from one of the two parents. Each member arising from what? One of the two parents. Because for an organism to be formed, there must be two parents. So a homologous chromosome is a matching pair of chromosomes because each is contained from each parent. Now, we have homozygous. I've explained heterozygous. Homozygous is an organism that possesses two identical alleles at the same locus or a pair of chromosomes. Just as I explained here, I told you that this is homozygous. This is also what? Homozygous. I hope you guys are following. We have a hormone. A hormone is a chemical compound secreted by endocrine gland and carried in the body. Hormones are not secreted by exocrine, but only what? Endocrine. Are we there now? Now, but in this scenario now, we are saying that what we are saying is this. We are saying that those hormones that enters the blood vessel are called what? Are called endocrine hormones. Are we together now? We have host. A host is an organism in which a parasite live on. Are we there now? We call them what? A host. Now move on to humus, an organic material in the soil. Humus. Humus are usually dark in color. Are we there now? So those organic materials present in the soil are called what? Are called humus. Now hydrolysis. When we're talking about hydrolysis in biology, the splitting apart of a compound into two molecules with the addition of what? With the addition of water. So that means we use H2O to split those particular compounds. Are we there now? So we call that reaction what? Hydrolysis. We have hydrotropism. Hydrotropism is the growth of plants or parts of a plant in response to water. Or then a growth of plants or body of a plant or parts of a plant in response to what? In response to water. We call it what? Hydrotropism. We also have hypermetropia. And hypermetropia is the inability to focus near objects. Or then that means we call it long-sightedness. The individual has difficulty seeing stuff that are very far. Now, that's hypermetropia. It is called what? Long-sightedness. Are we there now? Good. Now we have hyphae. Is a thread that builds up the structure of some fungi. Are we together now? Hypocotyle. A hypocotyle, in this scenario now, a hypocotyle is a part of the plumule that carries the cotyledons above the ground in epigynous germination. Are we there now? The part of the plumule that carries the cotyledons above the ground in epigynous what? In epigynous germination. I told you that in epigynous germination, that the cotyledon, is usually above the what? Above the ground. That is epigynous germination for us. Now, we move on to hypogynous germination. It's a type of germination in which the cotyledons remain. Now, this is hypogynous, not epigynous. In hypogynous, now hypogynous is opposite of epigynous. If epigynous, the cotyledons are above the soil level. Now, in hypogynous, the cotyledons will be below the what? Below the soil level. So let's see. The type of germination in which the cotyledons remain below the soil level and inside the testa. Are we together now? Now we have hypothalamus. Is a part of the brain that controls many of the body's activity. That's hypothalamus. Are we there now? Good. Let's move on to number I, ideogram. So we'll see karyotype later. Now, let's look at karyotype. What is karyotype? Generally, I want you to understand that karyotype, look at karyotype here so that you'll be seeing it with your eyes. A karyotype, look at it here. Look at karyotype. A karyotype, the size, shape, and appearance of a set of chromosomes during what? Cell division. Are we there now? So, the size, the shape, and appearance of sets of chromosomes during cell division is called what? Karyotype. Now, we have imago. Imago is an adult form of an insect. Are we there? During metamorphosis. Imago is what? An adult form of an insect. Immunity, the development by organism to resistance to disease, development of an organism to resistance to diseases. Are we there now? So when an individual is resistant, to a particular disease, we say that that organism has an immunity over that what? Over that disease. Are we there now? Good. We have what we call implantation. It's the sinking of the developing embryo into the endometrium of the uterus. The sinking of the developing embryo into the endometrium of the what? Of the uterus. After the what? Endometrium. Right? Good. Now we have what we call, incisor. Incisor is a type of tooth found at the front of the jaw and is used for what? Is used for biting. Are we there now? Incisor is used for what? Is used for biting. But where is it found? It is found at the top of tooth found at the front of the jaw. Are we there now? Good. We have incomplete metamorphosis. Incomplete metamorphosis, we're talking about the gradual change during development from young nymph to adult in some insects. Are we there now? Inflorescence is a flower cluster. Insectivorous plants are plants which traps and digest insects to provide it with nitrogen needed for protein synthesis. Are we there now? So those plants, that try as much as possible to trap insects, helping provide the plants with nitrogen for growth, are called what? Insectivorous plants. Now we have what we call, insertion. Insertion, the point of attachment of a muscle to a movable bone. It is called what? Insertion. Now, insulin, which is another concept, is a hormone secreted by the islet of the pancreas, which catalyzes the interconversion of glucose and glycogen in the liver. So that is insulin for you. But I want you to also understand that, one of the major functions of insulin is try as much as possible to regulate, sugar content in the blood. That is an important function of insulin. Now we'll move on to what we call involuntary muscle. Now, in involuntary muscle, what we are saying is that it's the muscle that is not under conscious control. So if you don't call it involuntary muscle, you can as well call it what? A smooth muscle. And then we have iris. Iris is the part of the eye that controls the amount of light entering through the pupil. Islet of Langerhans. Look at islet of Langerhans. Under islet of Langerhans, we are saying that islet of Langerhans, a group of cells in the pancreas which secretes insulin. Are we there now? A group of cells in the pancreas. What is their job? For secretion of what? Insulin. So we call them what? Islet of Langerhans. Good. Now we move on to K, which I will look at karyotype. Kidney, the organ that produces urine and acts as osmoregulator. The organ that produces urine and acts as what? Osmoregulator. All right, let's move on. If you have your question, don't forget to ask. Oh, don't forget to ask. Shoot your questions. Shoot. So they can next time shoot. Don't be afraid. Now move on. We'll look at kilojoule, the unit of measuring energy. Kilo simply means 1,000. So when I say 1,000 joule, it's the same thing as what? 1 kilojoule. And we then 1,000 joules is the same thing as what? 1 kilojoule, because 1 times 1,000 is 1,000 joules. Good. Now, kwashiorkor is a disease caused by shortage of protein in the diet. When you always consume, carbohydrate every minute of the day, morning, afternoon, night, you do it for, a month or a week self, you begin to see that, an individual will be running a risk of developing this particular condition called what? Kwashiorkor. Move on to L. L is lactation. It's the production of milk in mammals. That's called what? Lactation. Production of milk in mammals. Now we'll move on. We begin to look at what we call lactea. Lactea is a small lymph vessel inside the vilus of the small intestine. We move on to larva, the stage between the egg and adult in the life cycle of some mammals. Larynx, the voice box containing vocal cords at the top of the trachea. At the top of the what? The trachea. We have lateral bud. I've said this before. Lateral bud is a bud in the axis of a leaf. Axis of a leaf. We have laterite, a red-brown soil found in Nigeria, which is mainly made of iron and aluminium oxide. Now, this one is only found in Nigeria, though. Learning, the modification of behavior as a result of what? Of experience. Just as what I'm doing here, I'm teaching you. You are learning. You are learning from my experience. Are we together now? Because I've modified my, behavior based on my what? Based on my experience. So you are learning too. You want to modify your own understanding based off of the experience I'm, sharing here. We have also legume. Is a member of a bean, pea, and clover family of plants. They are a member of bean, pea, and clover family of plants. Lenticel, a small gap in the back of woody plants through which gas exchange takes place. So that means lenticels are usually found in the what? In the thick back of plants. What is their function? For gas exchange. Now we'll move on to leukocytes. Another name for leukocyte is what? White blood cell. Meanwhile, another name for red blood cell is what? Erythrocyte. Do not forget that. Now, we'll move on to ligament. It's a tough, non-stretching tissues that holds bones together. We move on to lipase. Lipase are enzymes that digest fats into, carboxylic acids and glycerol. So that means lipase are enzymes that acts on lipid. Are we together now? What do? They digest fat into carboxylic acids and what? Glycerol. Are we there now? Propan 1,2,3-triol is called what? Glycerol. The same thing. Now move on. We say we have what we call the liver, or we move on to the littoral, the region including both water and land at the edge, of a body of water. That's littoral. But beyond that, I want you to look at, what we mean by the liver. It's the largest gland in the vertebrate body. It has many functions, including the storage of what? Storage of glycogen. That is your liver. Are we there now? Now, beyond that, we also look at, what we call loam or loamy soil. Now, it's a balanced type of soil containing both, sand and clay. That is loam. And then we'll move on to loop of Henle, a U-shaped portion of the kidney tubule or nephron. Luteinizing hormone, a female gonadotropin. What is gonadotropin hormone? Gonadotropin hormone is sex hormone. So, a female gonadotropin hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. Are we there now? They are secreted by the what? Pituitary gland. So that means pituitary gland stimulate both FSH and what? LH. What is FSH? Follicle stimulating hormone. Now we'll move on to lymph. Lymph is a clear circulating body fluid derived from the tissue fluid. Lymph gland or node is a swelling on the lymphatic vessel. Lymph system, a network of thin walled vessels that carry lymph. It returns excess body fluid to the body and is part of the body's defense mechanism. Are we together now? Good. Now move on to lymphocyte. A lymphocyte is a type of white, cell found in the blood, and lymph important in fighting infection. Are we there now? So they are under lymphocyte. Is a type of WBC. Are we there now? What is WBC? White blood cell that try as much as possible, to help in fighting infection. Move on to M. We are getting there. We're getting there. Now, when we get to M, we say that M is what? The first one is Mafian tubu or Mafigian tubu. Is the excretory systems of what? Of insects. So in your past question, they can say, which of the following is an excretory, organ or system of an insect? If you see Mafian tubu, do not think twice. That is the answer. Move on to mammary gland. Now, mammary gland are gland in mammals that produces milk for feeding the young. Now, the possession of mammary gland is one of the characteristics of mammals. In fact, it's what makes us know that, okay, this is a baba. Like your whale, one of the stuff that help us to know that whale is a mammal is not even the size, but the possession of mammary gland and the ability of that whale to respire with lungs, even though it is in an aquatic environment. Do you understand? So whales do not respire with gills, they respire with lungs. And they possess what? Mammary glands. That's what even make them, to be a mammal. So we have mandible. Now, a mandible is the jawbone of vertebrates. Are we there now? The jawbone of what? Of vertebrates. We have mandible, we have maxilla. We have marasmus, a condition caused by insufficient quantity of food. When you're always eating half chop, half chop, half chop, the disease condition is called what? Marasmus. Are we there now? Caused by insufficient quantity of food. We have marsupial. Marsupial is a type of mammal though. It's a mammal that bears young one at very early stage of the development and keeps them in the abdomen pouch. Are we there now? We call them marsupial mammals, like kangaroo. Kangaroo are examples of what? Of marsupial mammals. What they do is that they produce their young one very early in their life cycle. When they produce this very early in their life cycle, they leave their young ones in their pouch, like inside their body. The young one is growing inside the body. Imagine that particular scenario. It's growing inside their body. So as it's growing, they will keep on, staying there up until a specific stage. So we call that particular, mammals, marsupial mammals. We have medulla. Medulla is part of the hindbrain that controls involuntary muscles. There are three important parts of the hindbrain. We have pons varoli, medulla oblongata, and we have the cerebellum. These are three important, parts of the hindbrain. Are we there now? Okay. We have meiosis. In meiosis is a part of meiosis. Meiosis is generally, is a cell division that results in halving of the chromosome number occurring in the formation of gametes. Are we there? Halving. That means the number of daughter cells is half the number of parent cell. The number of chromosome of the parent cell is equal to the number of chromosome of the what? Of the parent cell. Daughter cell half the number of parents. Now we have melanin, a pigment in skin, eyes, or color. Are we there now? Now, is a skin pigment in skin, eye, or even your hair. It helps to give color. Why an individual is dark is because it has dark melanin. Why an individual is fair is because they have fair melanin. The dark melanin is called eumelanin. Eumelanin. The fair melanin is called the pheomelanin. Are we there now? Good. Okay, we'll continue. We'll move on to meninges. Meninges, the protective membrane around the brain and spinal cord. Are we there now? We'll call it the meninges. Now we have menstruation, is the periodic, flow of blood. Are we there now? In every woman of childbearing age. We can see it's the periodic breakdown of the uterus lining and its loss through the vagina when no fertilization follows ovulation. Are we there now? Because if there is fertilization immediately after ovulation, because in ovulation, we're talking about releasing of that egg. So immediately after ovulation, if there is fertilization, there will not be what? Menstruation. That's when we say, I didn't see my period this month. I wouldn't, because you had an intercourse and then the sperm fertilized the egg. Fertilization has started. A baby is already forming. So you're not going to have menstruation. But for each month, whenever there is ovulation, the next thing that follows through is what? Menstruation. The shedding out of the uterus lining. Is called what? Menstruation. All right. So we have mesophyll. Mesophyll is the middle layer of cells in a leaf. Is called what? A mesophyll. Now, mesophytic plants are plants which require moderate amounts of water. We've look at epiphytes. You see that epiphytes are plants that live on another, organism or even inanimate, substance like your wall. And then mesophytes are plants that live or survive in an environment with moderate amounts of water. Are we there now? Good. So we have what we call also metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a change which occurs in life cycle from one form to another, each being of different what? Of different appearance. Are we there now? For you to become an adult tomorrow, you have to have grown from a baby, are we there now, to an infant, and then to adolescent, are we there now, and then to a teenager, whatever, before you get to adult. So those particular processes are called what? Metamorphosis. Now we have what we call micrometer. Micrometer is 1,000 times of millimeter. Look at how we write micrometer, UM, or you say 1 times 10 raised to power minus 6 meter. This is what a micrometer means. Are we there now? Millimeter is 1 times 10 raised to power minus 3 meter. That's millimeter. Are we there now? Good. So microorganism, we said that microorganisms are tiny organisms only visible with what? A microscope. So that means you can't see microorganism with an unaided eye. You need what? You need a microscope for you to view them completely. We'll move on to microfile. And when we're talking about microfile, we said that microfile, they are a small hole in the oval through which the pollen tube enters. Migration, seasonal movement of animals, from unfavorable condition to a favorable conditions. That's migration. An animal might decide, I don't want to stay in Nigeria again because, the environment is too hot for me. They will migrate to maybe Ghana. When they move to Ghana, they feel like, okay, this environment is okay. So the movement from one environment to another in search of greener pasture is called what? Migration. Are we together now? Good. So that is that. Now we'll move on. Continue. Moving on. We'll look at what we call, milk teeth. If you can see here, we have milk teeth. Now, a milk teeth is a set of teeth in the young animal that are replaced by the permanent teeth. Are we there now? Now, those particular, milk teeth, you begin to see that generally, it's usually in babies. At some point, babies will form some teeth. And as they continue to grow, those teeth will start falling off. And as they're falling off, the stronger ones will start growing on them. Are we there now? So those smaller ones that fall off initially are called what? Are called the milk teeth. Are we following what we're doing here? Good. So as we continue, we begin to look at what we call mimicry in biology. When we're talking about mimicry, mimicry is more like the resemblance of an animal to another animal or object so as to increase its chance of what? Its chance of survival. Say, for instance, chameleon. When you see a chameleon and then chameleon sees its prey, what chameleon will do is that they will try as much as possible to, counter shade. That is mimicking to the color of the environment immediately, such that the prey will not be able to catch it. Because they want to survive. If they do not, mimic, before you know it, that organism will die and their own will be gone. Their own will be forgotten. Rest in peace. That would be the story. But a phenomenon whereby they can actually try as much as possible to mimic maybe the color of the environment, maybe the shape of the next organism, it will help them to do what? To survive. You understand? So in this situation that we're saying, that is mimicry. We move on to mitochondria, a cell organ that is main site for the chemical reactions of respiration. So that means without mitochondria, organisms cannot what? Respire. So it is in mitochondria that ATP is formed. That's why we say that mitochondria are what? Powerhouse of the cell. We have mitosis. Mitosis is a cell division that results in two cell identical chromosomes in number with the original cell. Are we there now? So that means the total number of parent cell is equal to the total number of what? Of the daughter cells. That's mitosis. We have mitral valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle in the mammalian heart. I told you there are 4 chambered hearts. We have the left ventricle, the right ventricle, the left auricle, and the right what? Auricle. If you don't call it auricle, you call it what? Atrium. Are we together now? Good. Now move on. We have what we call the molar. We said that the molar is a type of tooth found in the back of the mouth. They are used for chewing and grinding food. When you want to chew all those hard bones, you use your molars to break them into pieces. Now move on to monocotyledons. Monocotyledons are flowering plants with one seed leaf in the embryo. Monohybrid cross, a cross between individual different in one inheritable discontinuous trait. The phenotypic characters or phenotypic values of monohybrid cross is usually 3 1:1. Genotypic is 1:2:1 in hormone hybrid crosses. So we have molting. Molting is the shedding and replacing of the exoskeleton, arthropod, feathers, or hair in mammals. I would then say, for instance, when an individual or an organism tries as much as possible to shed or replace its exoskeleton, it usually happens in arthropods, feathers in birds, or even hair in mammals. It's called what? It's called molting. We have multiple allergies that exist, in more than 2 forms, although only 2 can be present in a single individual. So, but they try as much as possible to exist in more than what? In more than 2 forms. We also have mutagen. Mutagen is an agent that causes mutation. Mutation is an inheritable characteristic that causes a gene produces a new characteristics. Or we say that mutation is a sudden change in the DNA sequence of an organism. That is mutation. Move to mutualism. Another name for mutualism, we say that we should go as symbiosis. Then we'll go there, we'll see there later. Now we have mycelium, a collection of hyphae making up the body of what? Of fungus. Fungus, singular, fungi, plural. We have myelin sheath, a layer of fat and protein that is wrapped around the axon of some nerve fibers. Then we have myopia, the inability to focus on distant objects. Are we together now? That is myopia. It is also called what? Short-sightedness. If myopia is called short-sightedness, hypermetropia is called what? Long-sightedness. Are we together now? Good. Now we advance. And for N here, we have nastic movement. A nastic movement is a non-directional movement of a plant part or a plant response to, by a stimulus. Now we begin to say that nastic is a non-directional movement. A non-directional movement. Nastic. A non-directional what? A non-directional movement. So a non-directional movement of plant or part of a plant in response to what? Stimulus. That's nastic movement. We have natural selection. In natural selection, let me explain. I don't know if you've seen giraffes. And then in the olden days, what happened was giraffe had a shorter neck. Are we there now? Now, because giraffe had a shorter neck, they were eating foods where their neck could reach. Are we there now? There are different trees, within the environment. So the shorter giraffes were just eating, food that their neck can actually get to. They consumed that food up until it got to a point where the food within their reach finished up. The only foods available were the foods that, were a bit further, from where their neck can get to. So those that had the strength to climb on others, to fight and get, top to eat the ones that their neck can reach will survive. Those that are weak, that say, I'm not get strength, I'm not rushing food. What will happen to them? They will die off. So that means we are saying that nature selects organisms that are strong in character, that have the ability to survive or withstand the environmental conditions. That's the theory of what? Of natural selection. Nature having the ability to select an organism because that organism is strong and ready, to withstand the environmental condition or environmental changes. That poses. That's what? That's natural selection. So in this scenario now, we say in nature, process in which the best adapted individuals survive in the struggle for existence. Just what I explained. The survival of the fittest. Those that are strong survive. If you are weak, bye-bye. Nobody send you. We have nematocyst, a stinging cell on the tentacle of a colentrate. A stinging cell on the tentacle of what? Of a colentrate. Colentrates are invertebrates. Colentrates are what? Are invertebrates. Now move on to nephridium. Nephridium, plural nephridia, is the excretory organ of what? Of annelids. Excretory organs of what? Of annelids. Excretory organs of insects are called what? Nephridia. Are we there now? Nephridium is the excretory organs of what? Of annelids. Annelids are also, invertebrates. Are we there now? We have annelids are invertebrates. Arthropods are invertebrates. Nematode are invertebrates. Are we there now? They are all what? They are all invertebrate. Molluscas, invertebrate. So let's move on. We have nephron. A nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. It's also called the what? The kidney tubule. Right? We have a nerve. A bundle of nerve cell fibers is called what? A nerve. Nerve impulse is an electric and chemical change that passes along a nerve cell fiber. A neuron is a nerve cell, the structural and functional unit of the what? Of the nervous system. That's your neuron for you. We have the node, the part of the stem bearing the leaf is called what? A node. Now, nodule, where we say root nodules, is the swelling on the root of a legume that contains nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Rhizobia or rhizobium. That's the nodule. Non-disjunction is the failure of chromosome to separate during meiosis. The failure of chromosome to separate during what? During meiosis. We also have, notochord. Notochord is usually found in the vertebral column. It's a rod-shaped structure that is replaced by the vertebral column in adult vertebrates. It is replaced, in the adult what? In the adult vertebrates. We have nucleus. I'm talking about nucleus. So a nucleus is part of eukaryotic cells that contains chromosomes and therefore is responsible for controlling the activities of the what? Of the cell. We have a nymph. A young insect is called what? A nymph. A young insect is called the what? The nymph. All right, we move on to O, which is oesophagus. Oesophagus is the tube carrying food from the mouth to the stomach. That's what? Oesophagus. Okay. We have Ommatidium. Ommatidium is the single unit of compound eye of the arthropods. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Now, move on to omnivore. Now, I've said omnivore countless times before. I said that when we're talking about omnivore, they are organisms who feed on both flesh and what? And plants. So omnivore animals who that is a mixture of what? Of plants and what? Of and animal materials. We have operculum, a flap that covers the gill slit in a fish. A flap that covers the gill slit in what? In a fish. Organ is a group of tissue working together to perform a particular function. That is organ. Are we there now? All right. We'll move on to organelle, a structure that forms part of a cell. An organism is a living thing. Origin, the point of attachment of a muscle of a bone, point of attachment of a muscle to a bone that remains still when the next bone moves. Osmoregulator is an organelle or organ that helps maintain water balance. Osmoregulator help in maintaining what? Water balance. Osmosis, the movement of a solvent by diffusion across a selectively permeable membrane. Are we there now? Across what? A selectively permeable membrane. Now we'll move on to ovary. We're talking about ovary. Ovary is the female reproductive organ where female gametes are produced. Where female gametes are what? Are produced. That's ovary for you. Are we together now? When we're talking about female gametes, we're talking about the egg. Meanwhile, an oviduct can also be called a fallopian tube, just as we mentioned initially. An oviduct is a tube that carries the egg from the ovary to the uterus. An uterus can also be called a womb. You don't call it a uterus, you call it a womb. So a tube that carries the egg from the ovary to the uterus is called what? The fallopian tube or the oviduct. Now we have what we call oviparous. Oviparous are animals which lay eggs with yolk to nourish the young. Are we there now? That's oviparous animals. Oviparous animals are animals that do what? That lay egg. Opposite of oviparous are what? Viviparous. Viviparous carries their young ones alive. They don't lay egg. And then we have ovoviviparous. Are we there now? Those that lay egg. And then, during the point of delivery, they store their egg inside. Their egg is inside. Are we there now? Fertilization happens internally. But when they deliver, they don't deliver their young ones just alive. The egg stays inside until the point of delivery. The egg will not hatch out, and then the new organism will come out. Are we there now? That's the difference between the two and the other last. We have ovum. Ovum is a female reproductive cell or gamete. Are we there now? Ovule is the structure in the ovary of a plant that contains the female gamete. Ovulation, the process of releasing an egg from the ovary. Are we there now? That's ovulation. Oxygen depth, the buildup of lactic acid during exercise, which is subsequently relieved by deep breathing. This usually occurs in people that run, take marathon. You are running for 2 days, 2 hours, 3 hours. Are we there now? That will be what? An oxygen depth. You say it's the buildup of lactic acid during exercise. And this is subsequently relieved, by taking what? A deep breath. We move on to P, paleontology. Just as I said in my class the other day, paleontology is a study of what? Of fossil remains. You don't call it fossils, you call it what? Fossil remains. What are fossils? Fossils are dead organisms, ancient organisms. Are we there now? That has been dead for a very long time. Palisade cell. A palisade cell, okay, is what I'm saying. A palisade cell is a cell in the mesophyll of a leaf. Pancreas is an elongated organ beneath the stomach, which secretes digestive enzymes and contains islets, which secretes insulin. Are we there now? So pancreas secretes what? Digestive enzymes. That is why, pancreatic gland is one of the most, important glands in the body of every living organism, because it doesn't just help to secrete hormone, it also helps in what? In digestion. Are we together now? Okay. Now let's move on. We have parasite. We said that parasite, an organism which lives in or on another organism, called what? Called the host. That is a parasite. Are we together now? Now move on. We have what we call parasympathetic system. Parasympathetic system. The inhibitory part of the autonomic nervous system is called what? Parasympathetic system. Now we have what we call pathogenesis, parthenogenesis, parthenogenesis. When we're talking about parthenogenesis, what are we talking about? We're saying that it's a development of an unfertilized egg which occurs in aphids and what? An insect. Development of unfertilized egg, not fertilized, unfertilized egg. We have passive transport. Passive transport, we're saying, is the movement of molecules across a membrane by diffusion. Passive movement of molecule across a membrane by what? By diffusion. The process is what? Diffusion. We have pentadactyl limb. Pentadactyl limb is a type of limb pattern that is found in all higher vertebrates based on 5 digits. Based on what? 5 digits. So penta is 5. So our vertebrate that has 5 limbs are called what? They have pentadactyl limbs. We have pepsin. Meanwhile, pepsin is an enzyme secreted by the gastric, pits or gastric juice of the stomach, which digests protein into what? Into polypeptides. Pepsin is the active form of this enzyme. The inactive form is called what? Pepsinogen. Are we there now? It's called what? Pepsinogen. Okay, we'll move on. We have what we call peptidase. It's an enzyme that digests polypeptides into what? Into amino acids. We have peristalsis. It's the muscular contraction of the wall of the alimentary canal that helps to move the food along. So that means peristalsis movement is the movement of food within the body. Are we together now? Now we have what we call permeability. Permeability of a membrane is the ability to allow a material to pass through. When we say this particular membrane is permeable, permeable simply means it allows materials. If you say semi-permeable, it allows some materials and it doesn't allow some. If you say completely permeable, it allows every material to do what? To pass through. Are we together now? All right, so we have what we call, a petiole. A petiole is the same thing as what? A leaf stalk. If you don't call it petiole, you call it what? A leaf stalk. And then we have phagocyte. A phagocyte is a blood cell that can involve and digest foreign material in the plasma. I hope you are jotting these things down. Please jot them down. No? It's very, very important so that you learn and not forget them tomorrow. Are we there now? I want you to do so well in your exams. No excuse. All right, we'll move on. We'll move on to, phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is engulfing, of particles by a cell. And meanwhile, a phagocyte is a blood cell that can engulf and digest foreign materials in the plasma. Are we there now? Engulf and digest foreign materials in the what? In the plasma. Now, we have phenotype. A phenotype is the appearance of an individual. A phenotype is what you can see. Please, if you are following, you can drop a comment so that I know that you are following. Since I can't see you face to face, let me know that you're not sleeping though. So I said that a phenotype is the appearance of an individual. So phenotype is, the parts that we can see. Are we there now? The physical appearance, the outward appearance of an individual is called what? A phenotype. Now, under phenotype, when we are done there, we'll move on to phloem. A phloem is a tissue in plants responsible for transporting dissolved materials. Are we there now? So this particular, phloem is responsible for transporting what? Dissolved material. Now, photoreceptor is an organ or sound that is responsible or sensitive to light stimuli. I'll move on to photosynthesis. Is the process by which green plants, manufacture their food through sunlight and water. It's a result of photosynthesis that make them to be what? Autotrophic. Are we there now? We have phototropism here. Is the growth of a plant or plant part in response to light. In response to gravity is called what? Geotropism. Are we together now? Now we have what we call pinocytosis, the engulfment of a droplet by parts of a cell. That's pinocytosis. Phagocytosis is engulfing of particles by a cell. Pinocytosis is engulfing of a droplet by a part of a cell. Are we there now? Okay. Pituitary gland. Now, a pituitary gland is an endocrine gland attached to the hypothalamus of the brain. Meanwhile, hypothalamus is found in the forebrain. Are we there now? Hypothalamus is found where? In the forebrain. Under forebrain, there are four, parts. We have thalamus. We have hypothalamus. We have cerebrum. Are we there now? And then we have olfactory lobe. These are the parts that are found in the forebrain. Thalamus, hypothalamus, cerebrum, and what? Olfactory lobe. So in this scenario, we're saying there's an endocrine gland attached to the hypothalamus, which is the forebrain, which secretes many hormones and control the production of hormones in other endocrine glands. Are we together now? Now we have placenta. In plants, the site of attachment of the ovus, is called placenta. But in mammals, the structure or formed from materials and embryonic tissue that serve to nourish their embryo. So placenta is more like a connection between the woman and the unborn, organism in the womb. Now we have what we call plankton. Plankton is more like a microscopic, life leaks and seas. Plasma is the fluid portion of the blood. Platelet is a cell fragment in the blood that play a part in clotting of the blood. That's platelet. And we have plumo, the embryo shoot in the seed of a plant. Are we there now? And then we have poikilothermic. Poikilothermic is an animal whose body temperature varies with that of the what? With that of the environment. Body temperature varies with that of the what? With that of the environment. Are we together now? Now we also have what we call pollen. Pollen is more like a tiny grain produced by the anther of a flower that contains the male gamete. That's a pollen. We have pollination, the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma, which always precedes fertilization in flowering plants. That's pollination. Pollination can either be self-pollination or what? Cross-pollination. All right, so we have what we call pollution, is the addition of harmful materials to the environment. That's pollution. And then polypeptide, a chain of linked amino acids. That's a polypeptide. We have polyploidy, more than the 2 sets of chromosomes, in the cells of nucleus. Posterior, the back or parts of an organism. Predation, the hunting, capturing and killing of one animal by another. Premolar, a tooth found between the canine and the molars, used for chewing and grinding. Are we there now? That's premolar, used for chewing and grinding. You keep grinding. Proboscis, a tubular structure extending from the head of an animal, used to suck up blood. Are we there now? Used to suck up what? Used to suck up blood. Now, we have prokaryotes. A prokaryote does not have a membrane-bound nucleus. Are we there now? A prokaryote does not have what? A membrane-bound nucleus. We have what we call progesterone. It's one of the female sex hormones. It is also what? An endocrine hormone. Why is it an endocrine hormone? Because it is produced in the pituitary gland. Now we have proglottid, a body part of a tapeworm. It's called what? Proglottid. Okay, we have proprioceptor, a cell or organ sensitive to stage of the muscle, changing movement and body position. We have prostate gland, a gland in the reproductive system of a male mammal that produces a fluid that forms part of the semen. Now, protein is a substance whose molecule consists of one or more chains of amino acid. Now folded into a specific configuration. Have protoplasm, the living part or living material of the cell. That's protoplasm. Are we there now? And then we have what we call puberty, is the stage at which humans become sexually mature. When they touching home economics, they mentioned what is meant by puberty and the stages of puberty and what you see, the changes you see in your body, and then you know that okay, I'm undergoing that stage called what? Puberty. Good. So we say pulmonary artery and vein, blood vessels carrying blood to and from the lungs. Pulmonary artery to and vein from the lungs. Good. Now, pulp cavity, central part of the tooth containing blood vessels and nerves. That's pulp cavity. Now, pulse is a surging of blood that can be felt in an artery where it overlies bone. That's your pulse. If an individual has fainted, they say check for the pulse. Let's know if that individual is alive. Because every individual that is alive must have a pulse. So pupa is the stage in the development of some insects between the larva and adult stage. Now we have pyloric sphincter. A pyloric sphincter is a ring muscle at the lower end of the stomach. That's what pyloric sphincter. All right. We still have a few more things to cover. Good. So let's finish it up. Let's finish it up this night. I don't want us to come back again. I want us to finish it up before we round off. Good. So I want you to go through what you've done. Do you have any question? Please let me know. Let me know. Let me know. Let me know. Okay, let's continue from where we stopped. Yeah. Now, if you look at that number, the next one, which is quadrat frame. In quadrat frame, you say is a known area, like 1 meter used to sample a habitat. Like if you want to check if this particular area is okay for a habitat to survive, the particular phenomenon is called what? Is quadrat frame. We use a quadrat frame to confirm if an organism can actually survive in this particular environment. Now we have a radical. When I was explaining adventitious root this morning, I said that radical, yesterday, I said that radical is, the embryonic part that helps to develop into a root. So radical here is the embryo root in the seed of the plant. It's in its embryonic nature. That will help to develop into a what? Into a root. We have radula, a rasping organ used for feeding in mollusk. Now we move on. We say we have what we call a receptor. Receptor is a cell or organelle that is sensitive to a stimulus. Are we together now? We have a recessive. A recessive is one of a pair of genes that does not show itself in the presence of alternative gene. So a recessive is usually in small letter, small r, small b. A rectum is the last part of the large intestine. That's called what? A rectum. Reflex is an automatic response to a given stimulus. Reflex arc is a group of 3 neurons that carries the nerve impulse for the reflex. We now have what we call renal artery and renal vein. They are blood vessels carrying blood to and from the kidneys. To and from the what? The kidney. Renal artery and renal veins. To and from the kidney. All right. Now, we say renin is an enzyme secreted by gastric juice or gastric pit of the stomach, which helps to curdle milk. So renin acts on what? Acts on milk. Are we together now? We have respiration, process by which energy is released from food materials in the cell. Are we there now? Respiration is all about energy being generated from consuming a specific food. Retina is the light-sensitive layer of the eye. Rhodopsin is the light-sensitive pigment in the rod cells of the retina. When you hear about rhodopsin, it's a light-sensitive what? Sensitive pigment. RNA ribonucleic acid is a single-stranded nucleic acid found in the nucleus and cytoplasm, which is involved in protein synthesis. Are we together now? We'll move on to a rod. Now, when we're talking about rod, a rod is a light-sensitive cell in the retina of the eye. That's a rod. Root cap, mass of loosely connected cells protecting the root tip. We have root hair. A root hair is like tuber-like extension of cells near the tip of the root that are important in water mineral uptake. Are we there now? They are important in water mineral uptake. We'll move on to roughage. Roughage are cellulose material in food that promote peristalsis in the alimentary canal. Are we there now? Now we have what we call rumen. Rumen, part of the alimentary canal in cattle. There are 4 chambers stomach in cattle. We have rumen, we have reticulum, we have omasum, and what? Abomasum. Alright, let's move to S. Sacu is the part of the inner ear important in detecting the head position. Saprophytes, an organism which feeds on digesting by digesting dead organic material outside the body and absorbing the product, just like we mentioned fungi initially. Are we there now? Now we have savanna, grassland with scattered trees. That's savanna, grassland with what? Scattered trees. We have sclerotic, tougher outer layer of the eye. Are we there now? Good. Okay, so we move to scrotum. A bag of skin that contains the testes in mammal is called what? Scrotum. A bag of skin that contains the testes, in the male mammal. Seed, a fertilized mature ovule of a flowering plant that contains an embryo. Are we there now? Segmentation is the social repetition of parts in the body of what? Of an organism. We have a semen. A semen is a secretion of the male reproductive organ that contains sperm and fluid secreted by associated glands. Are we there now? Semen can be that of a male, can be that of a female. Are we together now? We have semicircular canals, structures in the inner ear which are important in the maintenance of balance. Seminal vesicle, the part of the male reproductive system that secretes nutritive fluid for the sperm. Sepal is a modified leaf that protects a flower when in bud, bud. Are we there now? Serum is plasma from the proteins, that's fibrinogen, which have been removed. Sex chromosomes are responsible for determining the sex of an organism, like your X and Y chromosome. For the male is XY, for the female is what? XX chromosome. Now we have sex length, a characteristic determined by the gene on a sex chromosome. Are we together now? Now we have what we call sexual reproduction. Production that involves the fusion of the nuclei of a male and female gamete to produce what? A zygote. Skeletal muscles under control of the will, also called striated or voluntary muscle. Those muscles that you can control is called what? Skeletal muscles. Now, small intestine are part of the alimentary canal between the stomach and large intestine. Smooth muscles are called what? Involuntary muscles. Are we there now? Good. Now move on to society. Organisms living together in organized group. Solute, a substance that dissolved in a liquid, specifically a solvent. Move on to solvent. Solvent, a liquid in which solutes are dissolved to form a solution. Somatotrophin, the growth hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. Then now we have species, a group of individuals capable of producing fertile offspring. The smallest unit of the system of classification is called the what? The species. Because we move from kingdom to phylum, from phylum to class, from class to order. From order to family, from family to genus, from genus to species. So that means species is the smallest. Now we'll move on to sperm, a male reproductive cell or gamete. Spinal cord, a part of the central what? Nervous system. Spindle, a structure which forms in a dividing cell to put the chromatids in the pole. Now, if this is a chromosome, chromatid is just half of chromosome, half of it is what called chromatid. All right, so spiracle, a breathing hole found on the surface of an insect's body. Are we there now? All right, let's continue. We're almost there. Now, spontaneous generation, a theory which states that life can arise from non-living matter. That's spontaneous generation. Now we have sporangium, a plant part that produces spores. Are we there now? The question then is, what is spores? A spore is a reproductive cell of plant, usually produced asexually. Reproductive cell usually produce what? Asexually. Stamen, the organ that produces pollen in a flower. Are we there now? We have stamen. Stamen is like the male organ. Are we together now? Stamen. Now move on to sterile. A sterile is a soil which supports very little growth. I would say that this particular soil is a sterile soil. An organism that is incapable of reproduction is also called a sterile organism. Anything that is devoid of life is also called what? Sterile. We have now the sternum. The sternum is the what? The breastbone. Are we there now? We have stigma. We're talking about stigma. Stigma is a part of the female reproductive system of a flower. The tip of the style which receive pollen in a what? In a flowering plant. Are we together now? We have stolon, a horizontal stem. Have stoma, a microscopic opening on a stem or leaf through which gas exchange takes place. Stoma. Don't call it stoma, you call it what? Stomata. It's still the same thing. Now, style is the part of the carpel between the stigma and the ovary. Substrates, the molecules on which an enzyme works on. Subsoil layer. Subsoil is a layer of the soil beneath the topsoil that is lacking in humus. Now humus is more like, those particular materials that make the soil to be fertilized. Dark soils are usually humus soil, loamy soil, per se. Succession, the replacing of one species by another in a community until a climax is what? Established. Continuous replacing. Okay. Sorry about that. Now move on, say suspensory ligament. Now the non-stretching fibers that join the lens of the eye to the ciliary muscles are called what? Suspensory ligament. And then we move on to symbiosis. Symbiosis is when two or more organisms live together in close association for the mutual benefit. They are also called what? Mutualism. Two organisms live together, are we there now? For their close association, for the mutual benefits. Are we together now? Without any, bad blood, without any disadvantage, without any effect. Are we together now? They are called what? That's called symbiosis or mutualism. Let me update my light a bit. Sorry about that. Give me a minute. Just a minute. Well, I believe you can see what I'm doing here. All right. Okay, so in this scenario, we're back. So please focus up. So if you begin to look at this particular man here, we look at the sympathetic nervous system. In sympathetic nervous system, we're talking about the stimulating part of the autonomic, nervous system. Are we together now? And then we'll move on to the synapse, the gap or junction between two nerve cells and across which a nerve impulse must pass. Are we there now? Now move at synecology, the study of the interaction among organisms in their natural environment. Are we there now? So when we study the interaction amongst organisms in their natural environment, not organisms that will force them to stay in, but in their natural what? In their natural environment, it's called what? Synecology. Now, synovial membrane is a special membrane covering bones at joints, which produces a lubricating fluid called what? The synovial fluids. Now, we have syphilis, of course, sexually transmitted disease. Now, system, a number of organs working together for a particular function. Have systole, the stage in the heartbeat when the ventricle is what? Contracted. When the ventricle is what? Contracted. All right. Let's move to T. T is taxis, a movement towards or away from a stimulus. A movement towards or away from what? A stimulus. And then we'll come here, we'll have what we call taxonomy, the study of classifications. Organisms are classified, are we there now? According to their kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, are we there now? The family, genus, are we there now? And species to which they belong to. So we have tendon, tough non-stretching tissue that connects a muscle to a bone, called what? A tendon. And we have territory, an area guarded by an animal against intrusions by other animals of the same species. Testa, the outer coat of a seed. Testis, the male reproductive organ that produces sperm cells. Are we there now? Thoracic duct, the lymphatic vessel that returns lymph to the bloodstream. Thorax, the part of the body of a mammal above the diaphragm. There is also the middle part of the body of an insect that bears the legs. Threshold, the minimum stimulus needed to trigger off the nerve impulse. Are we together now? Thyroid gland, the endocrine gland, in the neck, which secretes the hormone tyrosine. Tissue, a group of cells performing a particular function. Tissue fluid, a liquid similar to plasma, which bathes all the cells of the body. Topsoil is the top few centimeters of soil that contains humus. They are called what? The topsoil. Toxins, a poison, example, produced by bacteria in the body. We have trachea. We're talking about trachea in terrestrial vertebrates, the windpipe leading to the lungs. Are we there now? It's called the trachea. In insects, the air tubes within the body is called the what? The trachea. Translocation is the movement of dissolved materials in the vascular tissues of a plant. That is called what? Translocation. Movement of dissolved material, that's the product of photosynthesis, in the vascular tissues like phloem and xylem of a plant. Transpiration, the loss of water by evaporation from the aerial parts of a plant. That is called what? That is called transpiration. Movement transpiration stream, the constant passage of water from the roots to the leaves of a plant in the xylem. Tricuspid valve, the valve between the right atrium or auricle and the ventricle in the heart of a mammal. Trophic level, the position of an organism in the food chain or web that is determined by the number of energy transfer that have taken place. That is called what? A trophic level. Okay. This should be the last page, so focus, stay awake, don't be distracted, make sure you fight and win. Alright, so we have tropism, a growth movement whose direction is determined by the direction of the stimulus. Example, geotropic parts of plants in the direction of or pull of the gravity. Have turgid, a plant cell or tissue whose vacuoles are full of water and are fully distended. Turgor, the water pressure inside a cell maintained by what? Osmosis. We'll move on to you. Have what we call the umbilical cord. And the umbilical cord is a cord containing blood vessels that link the mammalian embryo to the placenta. It links the mammalian embryo to the what? The placenta. Have urea, compound produced by the deamination of amino acids in the liver. It is removed from the body in urine. That is urea. We have ureter. Ureter is a tube carrying urine from the kidney to the bladder. Meanwhile, urethra is a tube carrying urine from the bladder outside of the body. The difference between ureter and urethra is that ureter carries urine from the kidney to the bladder. Meanwhile, urethra carries urine from the bladder outside of the body. Ureter, the one that ends with ER, carries urine from kidney to the bladder. The one that ends with RA carries urine from the what? Bladder outside of the body. Now we have uric acid. In uric acid, we are saying that uric acid, an insoluble compound produced by the deamination of amino acid in the liver of animals. We must conserve water. Are we there now? Good. And urine is a liquid that carries urea from the kidney. Uterus, part of the female reproductive system, which houses, nourish, and protect the developing fetus for the gestation period. Utricle are part of the inner ear, important in detecting head position. Right there. Okay, we'll move on to number V. Under V here, we have vaccination. The administration of a weakened dose of antibody to bring about immunity to disease. I think another name for antibodies is what? Immunoglobulin. Are we together now? They help in fighting against infection. We have vacuole, a fluid-filled space surrounded by membrane outside the cell. Vagina, a part of the female reproductive system in which the male penis is placed during mating. Are we there now? Good. We have vascular bundle, the structure of a plant cell which contains xylem and phloem. That's your vascular bundles. Vas deferens, tubes in the male reproductive system that carry sperm from the testes to the what? To the urethra. Remember, urethra tube carries urine from the bladder outside of the body. Are we there now? That is not just the only function too. Now we have vegetative propagation, a method of asexual reproduction in plants that involves growing parts. Vein is a vessel that carries blood back to the heart, or is the vascular bundles in a plant. Then veins carry blood back to the heart. They carry blood towards the heart. Vena cava is the main vein in a mammal. Are we there now? Just like we have aorta is the main artery in mammals. Are we together now? Good. Now we have ventra, the belly or lower surface of an organism is called ventral part. Are we together now? Good. Now we come here. We have what we call the venu, small blood vessels that carries blood from capillaries into the vein. Meanwhile, ventricle, a cavity in an organ such as the lower transmitting chamber of the heart of cavities in the brain. We have venous, a small blood vessels that carries blood from capillaries into the vein. We have vestigia. Vestigia, I usually say we have vestigial organ. It's a part that's a remnant of the evolutionary process, but it's no longer of use to the organism. So we call them vestigial organ. So examples of vestigial organ are your appendix. Appendix are vestigial organ. Coccyx are your what? Are your vestigial organ. Gap teeth are vestigial organ. Good. We have villus, plural villi, finger-like projections from the wall of the small intestines, which play a part in the absorption of the products of digestion. We have vitamin, an organic substance needed in minute quantities for the proper functioning of enzymes. So vitamins are needed in minute quantities or small quantities for the proper functioning of what? Of enzymes. We also have what we call vitreous humor. It's a jelly-like fluid at the back of the vertebrate's eyeball. Viviparous, organisms that nourish their young one within the uterus until they are born alive. They do not lay egg. Viviparous animals do not lay egg. Voluntary muscles. Say we should see skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are also voluntary muscles we can control. Meanwhile, involuntary are called what? Smooth muscles. Now we have W, warning colorations. They are conspicuous coloration that warns predators. We have white blood cells that form part of the body's defense mechanisms. White matter, part of the central nervous system made up of nerve cells. Are we there now? Good. We have what we call xerophytic. Xerophytic plants are plants capable of surviving where there is very little, amount of water or in an arid environment. Are we there now? Example is your cactus. We have xylem. Xylem is actually, when we're talking about xylem is a thick-walled spore. Are we there now? Developing after the fusion of nuclei in the reproduction of some algae and fungi. And then we have number 20 here, which is what? The zygote. Zygote is the cell formed by the fusion of the male and reproductive nucleus in the egg cell. Are we there now? We also have zygospore, a thick-walled spore developing after the fusion of nuclei in the reproduction of some algae and fungi. Meanwhile, xylem is the woody tissue. I think I misplaced the definition of xylem to zygospore. Meanwhile, xylem is the woody tissue in plants through which most of the water and mineral salts are transported. So these are some of the important concepts I want you to learn in biology. Are we there now? I know it has been hard a bit for you. So, but if you follow through and then you use your note to write these things down, it will be easier for you so that you know these terms. And when you are writing exams, you will not be discouraged and you will not be, dissatisfied. First of all, we need to even understand the question before we answer. So understanding the different concepts of these biological terms will make it easier for you to understand whatever we are doing. So thank you for, staying till this time. Have a lovely morning and a lovely day ahead. Happy Good Friday. Bye for now.